What's up everybody? Welcome back to another video. My name is David. I've been working and breeding reptiles and geckos for over 10 years and I'm here to answer your questions. Alright, so last week I posted a photo on Instagram and I told everybody to ask me their hardest questions about crested geckos and basically anything they wanted to know about crested geckos. So here we go, we're going to answer all of them. First question, do you like crested geckos or gargoyle geckos more? Personally, it goes back and forth. I like crested geckos so much, that's what I started with. At first, I'm going to be honest, I didn't like the gargoyle geckos so much. But when I started to see all the colors that came with gargoyle geckos, the reds and just the blotches and the bold stripes on them, I fell in love with them and now it's a toss-up. Some days I like cresteds more, some days I like gargoyles more. Second question, how to set up a bioactive enclosure for them and if it's the best form of husbandry. So bioactive enclosures are actually really fun to set up and they can take a lot of time, but the process is very enjoyable and the end product is always going to be worth it if you do it right, of course. In my personal opinion, if you have, if you're just going to set up one big enclosure for your crested geckos with a bunch of real plants and branches and real soil and isopods and all that, then go for it. It could be, it could be the best setup for you. But if you are looking to be breeding crested geckos, and that's not necessarily the best setup to keep crested geckos in because it's just going to take too much time and it's going to cost too much money. Now, you can make it so both type of enclosures, a bioactive setup or a regular, more breeder type setup will meet all the requirements of the crested gecko, and the crested gecko is going to thrive and feel happy and have a healthy life. If the basic requirements are the same for everything, make sure you fill up the volume of the enclosure, make sure that it has a lot of places for the animal to hide in, a lot of places for the animal to climb and jump, and the humidity is right and the temperature is right. As long as that's set up correctly, then you're gonna, whether you have a bioactive or a more simple setup, your crested gecko is gonna thrive. Next question, how to price your crested geckos. So it's gonna come down to basic supply and demand. If you have a big following and you sell crested geckos very fast, then your price is gonna come up a little bit. If you're still not well known and maybe you don't have the most crested geckos or you are just getting started, then your prices are gonna be a little bit lower. It really also depends on the type of morph that you have. High-end pinstripe, with a nice red base and thick pinstripes and a bright cream coloration, is going to go a lot more than buckskin crested gecko. So the way I learned this is basically by looking at all these different websites and seeing what everybody priced their crested geckos and taking the supply and demand thing to consideration. If I'm starting out as a crested gecko breeder, I'm not going to be able to price my crested geckos the same as northern gecko because, they've been around for 10 years. They're very well known. Their demand is a lot higher than mine. So I'm going to have to kind of gauge at their price, see what they price them at, and then maybe come down a little bit because that's how I'm going to get people to buy my crested gecko. Because why would somebody buy my crested gecko if I'm starting out, even if they're the same morph? If I'm starting out, why would they buy for the same price that they could buy from another breeder that's well known? They would just go to that well-known breeder because there's less risk that go with buying from a well-known breeder. I hope that answered your question. On to the next one. How long for them to grow full size? So that's really going to depend on how you grow them. Check out some of our other videos on how to grow your crested gecko or gargoyle gecko faster. But basically around 2 years is when they're full size. How can you tell when a crested gecko's eggs are close to hatching? Well, crested gecko eggs will start to swell up. They are the fabric. The eggshell is it's kind of rubbery, so it actually leaves room for the crested gecko to grow inside and it starts to expand. But it really depends on the temperatures. If you have it around 75 degrees, then the crested gecko typically hatches around 70 days or 80 days or so. Best and worst crested gecko morphs to breed together and why? So this is really a question that is very subjective. My particular best crested gecko morphs might be your worst. My worst might be your best. So it just comes down to taste and what you like best. Personally, I love pinstripes, I love lily whites, and I always say the best thing to breed together if you want to refine a morph is that same morph to itself. So if you want nice super Dalmatians, you're going to want to breed the best two super Dalmatians you could get. That's how you're going to get the best super Dalmatians. If you breed a Dalmatian to a flame, you're not really going to get really good Dalmatians. You're going to get some nice flames with Dalmatian spots, but if you want to refine a morph, you're going to put the best of the best back with each other. With the exception being the lily whites, of course, because that's a codominant mutation that the super form is defective. What's the best way to quarantine a new gecko before putting it in the same enclosure with other geckos? That's a very good question. When you get a new gecko, you don't want to put it in with your new geckos right away because you don't know if that new gecko has something that maybe will that will get your other geckos sick, or your other geckos might have something that will get the new gecko sick. So it's very important to quarantine. Now, the rule of thumb is to quarantine a gecko for about 2 months, 2 to 3 months. That's when you're going to get a good, you're going to get a good idea of how the gecko is doing. You're going to see how the stools are. If the stools are nice and firm, if the gecko is eating, if it's not losing weight, then those are all good signs. Now, ideally, you want to, quarantine the new gecko in a separate enclosure, even in a separate room. Now, that's a little extreme sometimes. So if you just have it in the same room, different enclosure, of course, maybe in a different side of the room, that will do also. Next question. Maybe this is obvious, but is it necessary to take your new gecko to a vet just for the sake of checking it out? I feel like this is a no-brainer with any new pet you get, but my only holdup about it was the concern about overstressing my gecko and possibly making it drop its tail. That's actually a very, very, very good question. When you get a dog or a cat, it is kind of like, it's very common knowledge to go take it to the vet and get it checked up and make sure everything is fine. Now, when it comes to reptiles, my personal opinion, you do not want to take that reptile to the vet, especially when you just get it, unless there is something that is very wrong with it. If it's an extreme case of some sort and you need the vet's help right away. And in that case, I would encourage you to please take it to a vet that is, a specialist in reptiles, because a lot of these other vets, they never seen a crested gecko before, or maybe they've never worked with one before, and they can actually do more harm than good. So take it to a specialist vet if the case is severe. If there's something that's really concerning to you, I would always ask the breeder first, hey, what's up with this? Get them to tell you if there's something wrong with the animal, which I would hope that you wouldn't buy from somebody that would sell you something that would sell you an animal that there's something wrong with. But if that's the case, you might be overthinking something. A lot of times, when you ship a new animal, when we ship animals to their new homes, they don't eat in the first couple days, and that's completely normal. The new stress, of shipping and acclimating to its environment can be stressful, and it could take a couple days for it to eat, but that's not a reason to take it to the vet. Now, like I said, this is a very good question because, no question that I'm seeing here is black or white. There's a lot of gray areas. My best advice is to ask the breeder what's up with the gecko, if there's something that you should be concerned about, and if there is, then you take it to a specialist reptile vet. Can baby crested geckos be in a 12 by 12 by 18 terrarium? The answer is yes, they can be. You could technically house a crested gecko in any size terrarium because, if you think about it, nothing is bigger than the wild. These guys hatch out in New Caledonia in the wild, and nobody's there to confine them in a little space so they can find their food. As long as the enclosure is set up properly, there shouldn't be any problem. But 12 by 12 by 18 is not too bad. But my personal opinion, you want to start with something a little bit smaller, especially with a baby, because that's just going to be easier for you, especially if you're a new crested gecko owner, to kind of like gauge how the baby is doing and to monitor their growth, and if they're eating, if they're pooping, which is always things that you need to consider when you have a new pet. Do male or female have different personality? No. It's really the personality is by individual. I am still doing my research, but when you do the bio enclosure, do you change any substrate? Do you change any substrate at any point? So that's a good question. Bioactive enclosures, typically you will put isopods in there, you will put springtails, you will put a lot of animals, like little animals that will break down the waste. But it's always good to stir the soil, to maybe add new soil. If something is developing a lot of like fungus or stuff, then take that out. It's always good to like add some new soil and stuff, but you know, you're not gonna have to change really the substrate until like a long time. It's gonna be years before you actually change the whole substrate if you do what I'm telling you and you stir the soil, if you have isopods in there that are gonna break down the waste and all that good stuff. And also depends on the size of the enclosure. A big enclosure is gonna take a longer time to change than a smaller enclosure. If it's a bioactive enclosure that's this big, then yeah, you might need to change it every couple months. How to best ensure that they're shedding properly so they don't lose toes, and some examples of healthy and not so healthy toes if you have them. Okay, so that's a very good question. If you never notice your crested gecko or gargoyle gecko or whatever shedding, if you never notice them shedding, that's usually a good thing. If you see that their shedding is staying on their body for more than 2 or 3 days sometimes, you know, and it's coming off in pieces, then that's a bad sign. So typically what you want to do is you want to have a good 60 to 80% humidity. You want to have a substrate that has, you know, that holds the humidity well. If you don't have a substrate that holds the humidity well, if you rather like house your crested geckos in paper towels, that's fine, but add a moist hide box that they could go into to, you know, to shed if they feel like it. The best thing to do is to keep the proper humidity levels, and then that will take care of the rest. Rank your favorite morphs from the least favorite trait to breed for compared to your favorite. Okay, so basically my favorite right now are the lily whites. I don't think it's, you know, that much of a surprise. Lily whites, pinstripes and super stripes and quad stripes. I would say extreme harlequins. You know, the reds are always, you know, one of my favorites. Yellows, like yellow pinstripes, yellow tigers, super Dalmatians, yellow super Dalmatians in particular. Asantics are nice too. And yeah. Hey, I was wondering, what is the oldest crested you've had? Many sites say 15, 20, some say 10 to 15. Others like Petco say 5 to 8 years. I'm sure they live shorter lives in captivity, but mine suddenly died and she was only 8. So one of the oldest crested geckos I have right now is around 15 years old. They could certainly live up to 20 years old, but that doesn't mean every single crested gecko is going to live that long. You know, I've had crested geckos die at 8 years old too. So it just depends, you know, it's like people, you know, some people are lucky and blessed with good genetics and they can live 120 years old. Obviously those people are far and few in between. Now there are more people are gonna be living up to 80 years old, and some die at 60 years old. So it just depends. Every gecko is different, but typically I would say the average would be 10 to 15 years. Let's hear some stuff about how Asantics came about, how strong the genetics are with them, and some plans for Asantic projects. Okay, so Asantic, if I'm not incorrect, the Asantics first popped up in the UK, and then some breeders here started to import them, and they started working with them. Now I only have one Asantic male right now. His name is Ozzy, and he, you know, this was his first year breeding, so I don't have really that much experience working with the Asantic project, so I can't really say how strong their genetics are yet, but they seem to all be doing good from the ones that people post online and everything, and I think they're a good, you know, a good, strong, healthy animal. Now, as far as my plans and my projects for the Asantics go, I am, like I said, I have this male Aussie that I have paired up with a bunch of females, including some lily white females, and hopefully I'll get some lily white head Asantics, because I already do have 2 lily white head Asantics that are growing up, and hopefully, you know, I can make lily white Asantics down the line. So those are my plans. Very exciting. I think in about 2 years I should start producing them. Feeding and what to feed. Can you train them? So feeding, it's very easy. Rapashi, Pangea, and crickets. And can you train them? I don't think so. I mean, they are, I think any animal can be trained to some degree maybe, but you know, good luck. Do they need hibernation in the winter? Where do they lay their eggs? And do they need a place to put them in? Okay, so do they need hibernation? Hibernation in reptile terms is called brumating, and they don't need to brumate, but a little temperature drop is always good for them, especially if you're breeding your animals. It slows down their metabolism, it slows down the females, and then when the temperatures rise, they get going again. Excuse me. Now, yes, if you're breeding them, they're gonna need a lay box, and you put the lay box with some moist substrate in there. Usually the females will, you know, find the lay box, they'll go in there, they'll dig up, and they'll cover up the eggs, and that's how you do that. A lot of these questions, guys, we have answered in other videos, like more specific, like this, for example, would be a perfect, you know, if you want to go more in depth about this question, check out our breeding crested gecko videos, and we have a lot of videos, so check out our page and our YouTube page and see if there's any other videos that interest you. Okay. My male started to try to bite and breed. I've had him for 2+ years. Handling went down, biting increased, or just dog or cat. What caused the increased aggression mating drive? So this person basically had a male that started to bite and try to breed the hand of the owner. Now, sometimes male crested geckos will do this. I don't know why they try to breed with our hands, but I think the best thing you could do is try to get him a female, see if that will calm him down a bit after he, you know, breeds a couple times. And just if you do have a gecko like this that's trying to breed your hand, maybe try washing your hands before you handle them, or, you know, just don't come in contact with any other female geckos. Does bee pollen give them any enrichment? Yes, bee pollen can actually be a very good supplement that you could add into their diet, but like any other supplement, I wouldn't suggest just, you know, adding some supplement into their diet if you don't know what it is, if you don't know how much to add. So if you do want to add it to the diet, you know, you could add it maybe like once or twice a week and just a little, you know, just a little pinch, but don't overdo it, obviously. How to bond with a really shy crested gecko? How often should you feed insects? So, bonding with a crested gecko, my definition of bonding with a crested gecko would be taming down a crested gecko, right? So, first thing, you want to make sure that when you first open up your crested gecko's enclosure, you're not like staring at it and hovering around it too much, or tapping it and making them run, and tapping it and making them run. If you're gonna pick up the crested gecko, just reach in right there and pick it up. Don't hesitate, because the animals will sense that hesitation and that will freak them out even more. So if you're gonna handle your crested gecko, pick it up right away. Don't allow for them to get scared of you, and then that's just gonna build up. So if they get scared, they're gonna keep getting more scared and more scared. So just go in there, pick them up, and just calmly handle them. You know, check out our handling video. You just do the, you know, the hand in front of the other, and as they jump or they walk, and maybe handle them 2 to 3 or 4 times a week. Not too long, maybe 15 minutes, and you know, it's gonna take time for them to tame down, but as they get older, typically they tame down very well. And how often should you feed insects? I would say once a week. How to differentiate, sorry, the immigrant's coming out. Differentiate the morphs, and also how to tell better quality of a morph, how to price, also how to pick up which baby gecko to keep for holdbacks if you happen to have some hatchlings. That's a very good question. So I kind of answered one of those questions already in terms of how to price, but how do you tell apart the different morphs? It's something that you're gonna have to learn by looking at a bunch of crested geckos. So check out our morph video here on YouTube. There's also a lot of good pictures of people comparing all the morphs together. We will also make another morph video because they're always super popular in the next coming weeks. As far as the better quality of a morph, basically if you have two pinstripes, right? You're gonna want to check the crests. You're gonna want to check the brightness of the colors, the overall pattern. You know, if the pattern kind of fades away or if it's very bold. So it's very easy to tell when, you know, when you have a low, if you put them side by side and you say, oh, this is obviously the nicer gecko. So that's like the best I could do for that question right now. And how to keep holdbacks is gonna take some experience. You know, sometimes you see a gecko that from as soon as they hatch, they have all these qualities I'm telling you. They have a really nice head, they have really bold patterns and colors, and obviously sometimes crested geckos take time to develop. So if it's already that impressive as a baby, you might want to hold that one back. What's their history? I actually spoke about this in my previous video, so check that out. But basically they come from New Caledonia. They thought they were extinct and now they're the most popular pet lizard in the world. Okay, that answers all the Instagram questions. I'm glad I got to answer a lot of these questions. I hope you stuck around for this whole video. If you have any more questions, feel free to drop them down below on this video, and I promise I will go back and go through all these questions and make another one of these videos where I answer all of your questions. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you like our channel and our videos, please make sure you subscribe and you follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, all the social media, we're on it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.